Hello and welcome to the Monday Morning Reset. Thanks so much for taking some time to join me this morning. I want to start our time together actually first by being a little bit vulnerable, just being a little bit honest with you. As a pastor, there are times in my life where I can be going about my ministry and I can feel a bit, like an imposter. I can feel a little bit like a fake. I can have times where in my mind, I'm wondering and questioning if I'm good enough, if I can really do this, if I have the right skills, if I have the right ability to be able to do this job well. Sometimes going throughout the week, I feel a bit fake. And I can have these voices that will find themselves rolling around in my head telling me certain things like, Curtis, you're just not good enough communicator. You can't teach well enough. Or I'll have voices that go around in my mind that are telling me, you're too young, or you don't know enough, or there's no way that someone could take you seriously. Right? I have all these different voices that can be rolling around in my head telling me I've made too many mistakes, that I'm not this or I'm not that. And I don't bring that up this morning because I feel the need to vent, although that's nice. But I bring it up because I think on some level, not just as pastors, not just in ministry, but just us as Christians, we can struggle with those same feelings of being fake, feeling like an imposter, feeling like we're not good enough. In fact, I think that we can find ourselves wondering, are we really good enough to be used by God? We look through the Bible and I think we see all these different heroes of the faith. We see these big, great, grand figures, the Moseses, the Esthers, the Abrahams, and we think to ourselves, that's just not me. Right? I'm not this great spiritual person. I have these struggles, I have these issues, I have these character flaws. There's no way that God could show up and use me in a great way. And so like me, you might find yourself with some voices rolling around in your head from time to time. And I'm telling you, you're not outgoing enough. Right? You're too introverted, you're too reserved for God to use you in some big, great way. Or maybe you think, I'm not smart enough. I don't know enough about the Bible. I don't know enough about theology. I don't know enough for God to be able to use me. Or maybe you think I'm not spiritual enough, or I'm not old enough, or I'm not young enough, or I have an anger issue, or whatever it is, we can find ourselves thinking, I just can't be used. Maybe you find yourself thinking about that spotted past you have. Maybe there's some things you've done, some things you've said. And when we look at this laundry list of limitations that start to pile up, when we really start to look it in the face, I think we just have this feeling inside where we just know. There's no way. There's no way God's going to show up and use me. It's just a little bit too much. We think to ourselves, maybe one day I'll get myself in order. Maybe one day I'll be in the spiritual position to be able to be used by God. But for now, I better just take a back seat. For now, I better leave that to the real Christians, the real ones that are spiritual, the ones that are put together. It can be easy for us as Christians to have that feeling of being an imposter, being a fake, and thinking that God can't or won't use us exactly as we are right now. But every time I find myself dealing with those voices, every time I hear those things rolling around in my head, I find myself again and again drawn back to the story of Moses. And hopefully some of you are familiar with the story of Moses, but I want to take a look at a particular portion of Moses' life because I think it has a lot to tell us about who God can and can't use and who God will and won't use. So before we jump in and read a little bit of that, I want to set the scene for us first. Right? God has called the Israelites to be himself, to be his people. He has made a covenant with them. And yet something goes wrong. Suddenly we find that the Israelites have been taken into Egyptian slavery. Right? They're oppressed. They're held in bondage by Egypt. And we're introduced then at this part of the story to a character named Moses. And Moses grows up thinking that he's an Egyptian. But one day, Moses learns the truth, that he himself is also an Israelite. And when he hears this, he begins to look out and see the Israelite people. He sees the way that they've been oppressed. He sees the wrong that's doing to him, and he's conflicted. He identifies with them. And so he wants to do something. He wants to help them. He wants to free them. And we find that he gets into an altercation with an Egyptian male. And he ends up striking this man dead. And he runs off into the hills. And so Moses takes some time up here and he begins to settle into a new life. And in fact, maybe he's finally put all of the past behind him. And then one day, God shows up. and he encounters Moses and he tells Moses, look, I have this plan. There's something that I want to do. I want to liberate my people. And then God tells Moses, I want to use you to do it. But when Moses hears this, he's not so sure about this plan. In fact, Moses, he has some apprehension. He's worried. He's nervous. And I want you to listen to what it is that Moses says to God. Exodus chapter 3, verse 11. Listen to this. It says, but Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Right? Moses here says, whoa, hold on. Time out. You've got the wrong guy. Right? Who am I? Why pick me? Why should I be the person that's going to go and free these Israelite people? Clearly, you've selected the wrong guy for the job. But then God responds to Moses, and he says this in verse 12. It says, and God said, I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Do you catch that? Right? God says to Moses, you might think that you can't do this, but you're forgetting something that's very, very important. I'm going to be with you. God doesn't tell Moses, look, you're going to be fine because you're the most qualified. God doesn't tell Moses, you're going to be fine because you possess all the skills I need to accomplish this task. No, he doesn't say any of that. Instead, he tells Moses, you're going to be fine because I'm going to be with you. I'm going to be helping you. And he says, Moses, you're going to know that this is the case because you're going to find yourself here on this very mountain after you have helped me free my people. And we're going to worship here, right where we're standing now. But even after God gives Moses this reassurance, even after God says, Moses, you don't have to worry, I'm going to be beside you, Moses still is afraid. He still isn't sure if things are going to work out, and he begins to give to God this big laundry list of reasons why he's not someone that God can use. He goes up to him and says, well, there's a problem. Maybe they won't believe me. And God says, don't worry, that's fine. If that's the case, then here's what I'll do. I'll show up. We'll do this incredible sign with your staff. They'll know that it is me, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that's with you. And Moses says, okay, that's great, but I have a problem. I can't speak very well. I'm not articulate. I'm not a good communicator. You need to find someone else. And God says to Moses, that's fine. You don't have to be a great speaker. I'll be with you. And yet Moses still struggles. He says, no, God, look, please, I can't. And he says, okay, fine. Your brother Aaron, he's a good speaker. I'll send him with you if it'll help you, if it'll make you comfortable. I'll send Aaron alongside you. But again and again, Moses brings up all these laundry lists of reasons why it is that God has the wrong person, why it is that God couldn't ever use him. But again and again, God tells Moses, you can do it, not because you're the most qualified, but because I'm going to be with you. And as the story goes on, as most of you probably know, that's exactly what happens. God uses Moses in this great, grand, profound way to free the Israelites from Egyptian slavery, and they find themselves standing on that very mountain, just as God said it would happen, freed from Egyptian slavery and worshiping him, where he'd first have that conversation with Moses. God made good on his promise. He used Moses in this great way, even though he thought there's no way that could ever be the case. And so hopefully you can see why I'm drawn to this story when I have those voices rolling around in my head. Hopefully you see why I'm drawn to this story of Moses when I begin to feel like an imposter, feel like I'm not good enough or not whatever enough for God to be able to use me. This story is important because it shows us that despite Moses' spotted past, despite the fact that he had murdered a man, despite the fact that he was frail and inadequate, he wasn't a good speaker, he wasn't very articulate, God still wanted to use him. And the same is true of us. Right? So no matter what you're thinking it is that might be keeping you from being able to be used by God, the story of Moses tells us today that that's not true. In fact, here's what I think we really need to understand today, is that our limitations don't limit God. Our limitations don't limit God. They don't limit God's ability to be able to use us. In fact, I think God wants to work with us in our weakness, in the midst of our limitations, in the midst of our frailty. Because God choosing to use broken, fragile, frail people isn't something that he just does from time to time. No, this is our God's MO. It's what he does. He wants to take the weak, he wants to take the broken, he wants to take the frail, and he wants to use them for his purposes. Right? Moses wasn't some great spiritual giant. He was a murderer who fled the scene and was so nervous that he could barely speak. And we don't have to be this perfect spiritual giant for God to be able to use us in great and profound ways. So today, no matter what you've done, no matter your flaws, your imperfections, God wants to and will use you to accomplish his purposes, if you'll allow him to. So I want to encourage us, instead of resigning ourselves to being unusable by God, let's focus on God's strength, not our weaknesses. Instead of looking to come up with excuses as to why God can't use us, let's instead rest in the God who tells us that his power is made perfect in our weakness. And let's look to follow him wherever he might be looking to send us. Thanks so much for being with us this morning. We look forward to seeing you next Monday.